Hey guys, Charles Yeager for Tuts Plus. Today we're going to be looking at how to create a 360-degree video inside of After Effects. We're going to be using the plugin SkyBox Studio by Mettle. Now before we move forward, I just want to say that anybody can follow along with this tutorial because if you go to mettle.com, you can download a free trial of the software. That's actually what I did at first. I went and downloaded the trial version, experimented with the software. Once I liked it, I went ahead and acquired the plugin. Now with the trial version, you're going to be able to do everything we're going to be doing today. When you export the video though, you're going to have some watermarks on your footage, but that's still going to be okay. You're still going to be able to experience the video in full 360 degrees on YouTube. Now what we're going to be doing today is I'm going to be using Element 3D with SkyBox to basically create a full 360 degree video of an element animation. Now you can use any 3D plugin with SkyBox such as Trapcode Particular, Trapcode Mirror, or just using 3D text and 3D shape layers inside of After Effects. So everybody should be able to follow along with this tutorial. Now we're going to take it a step further too though. I'm actually going to move the camera inside of the 3D space through the element scene, which is going to create a cool effect, be very immersive. So basically during this video, not only is it going to be 360 degrees, but we're going to be basically moving through the animation. And once we get done, I'm also going to go over how you can upload the video to YouTube and some different ways to view your 360 degree video. We'll go over that at the end of the tutorial. All right, let's get to it. All right, inside of After Effects, after you've downloaded and installed SkyBox Studio, let's go ahead and create a new composition. Now when you're making a 360 degree video, your compositions are going to need to be at 1:1 aspect ratio. So instead of 1920 by 1080, I'm going to do a 1080 by 1080 composition. That way it's 1:1. And for the frame rate, I like to use 30 frames per second. The reason for this is because with 360 degree video, it's very difficult to do motion blur because of how many cameras are rendering at the same time. And so basically the more frames you have, the smoother the video is going to be. So if you're used to filming or doing videos at 24 frames per second, I'm going to encourage you to do them in 30 frames per second. You can even do them in 60 frames, but just for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to do mine in 30 frames. And for the length of my video, I'm going to do 15 seconds long. I'm going to go ahead and name this composition Main. Click OK. All right, so now you can see we have a square composition, which is 1:1 ratio. I'm going to right click here. I'm going to go to New Solid. I'm going to call this E3D for Element 3D. Click OK. And over here on the effects panel, I'm just going to type in element, drag that onto our solid. All right, now we have our element layer created. And as I said, you can use any 3D plugins with this. I'm going to go ahead and close my effects panel here just so we can have a little more room here in the window. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and go into the scene setup of element. All right, inside of element, you can use any 3D models that you currently have, or you can go ahead and create some of your own shapes if you want. I'm going to be using the skyscrapers from the Metropolitan pack, but if you don't have that pack, you can, like I said, create some square shapes or any of the starter pack models. I'm going to go ahead and delete this. So I'm going to go to Metropolitan. I'm going to go to the No Antenna section. Down here to the bottom, I like to use the street layouts. I'm going to use street layout 4. I'm just going to set this on group 1. And I'm going to select an environment map here. I'm going to select one of the Metropolitan environment maps, Golden Skyline. And click OK. All right, we don't have a 3D camera currently created, but what I like to do is I like to go ahead and create a new camera. 24 millimeters is fine, click OK. And what this camera is going to be is basically just the camera I'm going to use to kind of just build my scene with. We're going to delete this camera after we get our scene built. So I'm going to hit C just to bring up the camera navigation tool here and just kind of navigate around my scene. I'm going to hit C again so I can pull out here. First thing I want to do is under render settings, under lighting, I'm going to select the cinema preset just so we can kind of get our model lit up here. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to build a very basic scene. Like I said, you can build yours as complicated or as basic as you want to, but just so we can kind of get to more of the 3D aspect, I'm just going to keep this really simple. So under group 1, under particle replicator, I'm going to set this to a plane. I'm going to set the plane count to 4. And I'm going to scale the shape up so that basically we have 4 city blocks here and they kind of connect. Just from already doing this before, I know that 19.98 is going to be what I want. So we can go ahead and rotate around. We can see we have this 4 different city blocks here. Zoom in here. And this is basically going to give us a big enough scene that we can kind of navigate through and do an animation in. And it's going to look good for 360 degree video. Okay, so now what we want to do is go down here to our layers, and I'm going to delete the camera we just created. If I pull back here, now we can see we have our element scene, but we don't have any cameras going on right here, which is just what we want. So now we can go ahead and jump into using SkyBox. And what SkyBox is, it's a combination of plugins and scripts. And the first thing we're going to want to do is select our main composition, and we're going to want to head and run the SkyBox Creator script. So if we go to File, Scripts, SkyBox Creator, which is just off the screen here for me, it's going to bring up this script box. And what we want to do, since we've already created our scene and our composition, we're going to select Create SkyBox from a current composition, and this is the main composition, should be the only one we have. And we have a couple options down here. We are going to be using 3D plugins, so make sure that's checked. And with my SkyBox cameras, I find it a lot easier to navigate the master camera with a null object. So what they've went ahead and integrated here is to create a 3D null that's parented to the camera control. So we're going to check that. And now let's click Generate SkyBox Output. That's going to go ahead and run through. Now I'm going to close this just for the time being. And what this has done, it's created an equal rectangular image, or an environment map essentially, in a new composition right here, and create a new folder called Main, which is based off our composition, and SkyBox Output. We can open this up, and there's the main SkyBox Output, which is what we see here. And this is the video we're actually going to want to export when we're finished with our video. And if you notice right now, it kind of looks weird because what's happening is the camera it created is dead center of our element scene, basically right on the street level, which is why this kind of looks a little bit odd. But we can fix this easily. So what we're going to do is go back to our main composition, and we can see what the script has done here. So we have our SkyBox master camera, and that's the camera we can actually use. If I hit C here to look around the scene, I'm just going to hit Control Z to reset that. And we have these 6 other cameras that have been created. So basically, if you've ever seen those GoPro camera rigs that have 6 different cameras that can see in every different angle, that's basically what SkyBox has created here, but inside of After Effects. And the awesome thing about 360-degree videos in After Effects is it's basically a mathematical science here. Everything is going to be exact. We're not going to have to worry about any cameras being off kilts a little bit, something being off. It's all going to line up perfectly with this script, which is awesome. So we have our master camera, we have the null object here named Master Camera Controller. So this is what will control the position of our camera. I'll just hit P there, and we can control our camera's position with this null object. Now I'm going to go to a custom view here, which is just off the screen, just so we can kind of see what's going on. So I'll zoom in here, and we can see our camera is right there, even with the floor of element. So what we want to do is move that camera off the floor. So with our null object controller here, I'm just going to pull this up a little bit. If we go back to our active camera view, now we can see we're up off the ground, and we can raise and lower our camera inside of this composition. And again, we can look around anywhere in this scene. This is what we're going to be seeing when we export this. Now one thing to note is when you navigate around with your master camera, you're probably going to want to reset your orientation by clicking on your camera. Under the transform setting, under orientation, you're going to want to put this back to 0, especially before you export your final video, because whichever way this camera, the master camera, is facing, it's going to be the way the video is going to start on your final 360-degree video. But we'll talk about this a little bit more as we move further down the line, but that's just a good thing to note. Whenever you look around, just make sure you either hit Control Z or reset your orientation when you get done. All right, so let's go ahead and start moving the camera around here to our starting position of our animation. We have a 15-second composition here. I'm going to pull the camera back in Z space. Basically kind of right, so it's right above. I'm going to hit C here to look down. I want it to be basically right above this intersection here. I'm going to Control Z. I'm going to pull it forward just a touch more. That should be pretty good right there. Hit Control Z to get the angle back up. All right, now I'm going to go back to a custom view here just so I can show you all something else. So there's our camera right there, our master camera. And this is just to give you kind of a visual, again, of all the cameras we have going on here. You'll notice these other cameras here, the front, right, back, and all of them are locked. You're going to want to leave them locked. I'm just going to turn on the visibility of them just so you can see what's going on here. All of these 6 different cameras here are linked to our main master camera. You can see that whole jumble of cameras, just like those GoPro rigs that I mentioned before. That just kind of gives you an idea of everything that's going on here. So basically, we're rendering element from 6 different angles at 1080 by 1080. So that's just something to keep in mind when we're working with this. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pull this down just so we have a little more room here to see what's going on. Go back to our active camera view. So what I want to do, I want to have my camera positioned, my starting position, kind of above the city here. I'm pulling it up so it's above the city. And I want to move forward and down. So it's kind of like we're moving through the city, but we're also moving down, getting closer to ground level. So I'm going to go ahead and create a keyframe here on the position of my null object. I'm going to move down to the 15-second mark. Let's go ahead and move forward, basically the middle of the city. And let's also move it down, really close to ground level. Now, one thing to keep note of with element, when I move really close to the ground, I'm going to look down here and you're going to see the camera's going to kind of cut off right there. And what's happening here is on element settings, the camera cutoff needs to be adjusted. So if I go down here to my element layer, under render settings, the bottom one here is camera cutoff. It's set at 10 to start, so I'm going to set this to 1. So now we can see that black bar disappeared. So if you ever see any of element like disappearing as the cameras get close, it's probably because of camera cutoff, so you're going to want to set that to 1. Let's go back up here to the master camera. I'm going to reset the angle here for the orientation to 0. Now if I scroll through here, we can kind of see the animation that's happening. So we start out above the city, and now we're moving through the city and down through the city. So it's going to be a pretty cool 3D experience. So we're going to be moving through our element scene and kind of down to the ground level here. All right, now that we have our animation kind of going on, let's go ahead and jump back over to the main SkyBox output composition. And now if we look at this, we can kind of see this equirectangular image here. And what this is the very first frame. So we're at the edge of our city, and that's why it looks like this. If we go back here to main, that's where we are right now. I'm going to do a couple extra things with element just to make this export a little bit better. So what we can do here, I'm going to click on element, and I'm going to go to render settings, physical environment, and I'm going to turn on show background. So it's going to show the metropolitan environment map that we have back there. But if you notice, when we move through our scene, see the environment map is really far away, and our scene is pretty small comparative to a 3D video. So when we move through the scene, it kind of looks like the environment map is just basically way off in the distance, and we're kind of on our own little island floating here. And that doesn't look very good, especially for the immersive experience we're kind of going for. So I'm going to kind of trick this. You know, you could render this with the background just completely off, which would kind of immerse it a little bit more. But I'm going to kind of trick this a little bit. I'm going to go down here to fog, and I'm going to set this to kind of a white blue here. I'm going to click enable fog, and I'm going to set this to exponential and raise this up to about 60% or so. And all that's going to do is kind of basically give us something there in the background, but the fog is going to kind of help mask that that environment's so far away. I might even increase this just a touch more. One other thing to note, when you're using element with SkyBox, you're probably not going to want to use motion blur very much, because this is really going to add a huge hindrance on the render. Because like I said, it's exporting 6 different ones at the same time. So if you can imagine doing 6 different instances times 12 samples of motion blur each, it's just really going to bog down the video. And so you're going to want to make sure your settings are kind of dialed back. I typically render mine with motion blur off just because of how the camera's going to be moving in 360-degree space. The motion blur is not going to make that much of a visual difference, and it's going to add a lot on the render time. All right, so now let's go back to our main SkyBox output composition. Now you'll probably notice something going on here. You don't see the fog or the environment map that we just turned on our element layer. Well, this can be fixed, and this is something you're going to want to do before you export anything from SkyBox. And that's going to be, you're going to want to go back to File, Scripts. You're going to select SkyBox Creator again. That's going to bring up the SkyBox Creator effects box again. And what we need to do is basically refresh SkyBox, showing it our main composition again and our animation changes. So you're going to want to make sure you select main and not main SkyBox output, because we want to just do it on our main composition. And now you'll notice the button says refresh SkyBox output. So we're going to want to click that, but before you do, remember we're using a 3D null camera control. So we're going to want to make sure we turn that back on again when we refresh it, because if we don't, it's actually going to delete that null object, and it's going to unlink all of our keyframes that we did on the 3D null for our camera controller. So now that we've got that checked, let's click refresh SkyBox output. It'll just take just a second. And now there's our fog and our environment map, and we can just scroll through here to kind of see what's going on. This may be a little bit laggy on your machine, because you have to remember that this is rendering 6 different element compositions at 1080 by 1080, which is going to be pretty render heavy, and I'm viewing this on full right now, so that's also going to add to the render. I'm gonna set this to half just so we can preview, but now we can see we're kind of flying through the middle of the street, creating a very cool equirectangular image here, all the way down to where we get very low street level. Just to show you a little bit more about the plugin here. So what we've got going on here with the SkyBox Converter, which is another effect that was ran by the SkyBox Creator script, what it does is it takes a cube map and it turns it into an equirectangular image. So I'm gonna kind of show you what this is. I'm gonna set this to cube map with the output. So you can see we have 6 different boxes here. And this is basically the 1080 by 1080 compositions from our camera rig in our main composition. So we have the top view, the left, center, right, back, and the bottom view. And we can scroll through here. Pretty trippy looking. But basically what SkyBox is doing is taking these 6 cameras, the input, which is a cube map, and setting it to an equirectangular image, basically stitching those together for an output image that YouTube can then create a 360-degree video from. Now for our output frame width, I like to set this to 3840. That's just because YouTube kind of prefers that width for 360-degree videos. And now we're basically ready to export our video. So if we go to our render queue here, in our project, make sure that you render out your main SkyBox output composition and not your original main composition. That's because we want to export this equirectangular image. I'm going to drag that to my render queue. I'm going to export this out as a QuickTime file. And for format, I'm going to do photo JPEG at 95% quality. I'm going to click OK. Now when we upload to YouTube, we're going to actually have to convert this file to an H.264 file. And I like to do that in Media Encoder. But before I do that, I always like to export a higher quality version first. That way it just kind of has a little bit better conversion in Media Encoder. So that's what we're going to do here. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to go ahead and name this export SkyBox City. Click Save. And one last step, before we actually export our video, I like to close the composition window. That way it's not having to render a preview while it's exporting. And this can help prevent things from crashing during the export because, like I said, it's rendering 6 different instances of Element 3D. It's just going to be a very render-heavy export. All right, so let's go ahead and click Render. I'm going to fast forward through this so we can get to the end of the render. All right, now that our video file is done exporting, we can go ahead and click on it and check it out here. You can see it's 15 seconds long. It's 801 megabytes because we did a high-res render. It's 3840 by 1920, so it's pretty large. We can preview it here. I can scroll through. You can see it looks just like an environment map. We're actually moving through the city, and we get close to the ground here. Now there's 2 things we need to do before we upload to YouTube. We need to first convert this to an MP4 file. So I'm going to use Adobe Media Encoder to do that. Right now we're in Adobe Media Encoder. I'm going to show you guys the exact settings that I use when I upload 360-degree videos to YouTube. Let's go ahead and add our video. I'm going to select our high-res QuickTime video. Right now we got that in Media Encoder. You're going to want to set the output to H.264. And let's click on this to change our export settings. It's going to pop up this dialog box. By default, the video is going to be set to match source high, which is kind of what we want, but we're going to want to tweak a couple things here. You're going to want to check on render at maximum depth. And for the bitrate encoding, I'm going to change this to constant bitrate. I'm going to set this to 100. I typically export all of my 360 videos at 100, but if you have a lot of action going on, you may want to bump this up to 150 megabits per second. YouTube actually recommends that if you have a lot of action going on. And you could even get away with doing it as low as 50. It just depends on what's going on in your video. I'm going to set the keyframe distance down here to 30. And I'm also going to check this box to use maximum render quality. I'm going to turn off export audio just because I don't have any audio on this video clip. If you have audio, definitely leave that on. I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to click play up here to export it. All right, now you can see we have our new MP4 file, which is what YouTube requires 360-degree videos to be. And you can see the file size is a lot smaller at 178 megabytes. Now there's one more step we need to do. We actually need to add a little bit of metadata to our video so YouTube can recognize this and know that it is a 360-degree video when we upload it. Lucky for us, YouTube makes this really easy because they've created their own metadata tool that you can download. I'll have the link to this in the description, how to get to this tool. But they have a download for either Mac or Windows, and you just download this to your computer. All right, after you've downloaded the 360-degree video metadata tool, just double-click it. You might get a warning that pops up, just click Run. This little dialog box is going to pop up to inject your video with the metadata. Go ahead and click Open. Then just navigate to your MP4 video. Click Open. And it's going to say that no metadata has been found on the video, which is correct. So let's go ahead and check this box that says spherical. and click Save As. I like to save mine in the same location as the original, and it's going to have this underscore injected at the end of the name, which is meaning that it's been injected with the new metadata. Click Save. This will just take a second. Then it should say your file's been saved successfully, and you go ahead and click Quit. All right, so now we're ready to go ahead and upload our 360-degree video to YouTube. Just make sure you upload the version that's been injected with the metadata. Now there's a couple different ways you can watch your 360-degree video. The first is just on a Google Chrome browser on youtube.com. You can navigate around the video, you can drag with your mouse, and you can look around the entire 360 degrees of your video. Next is on a cell phone that supports 360-degree video through the YouTube app. This way it's like you have your own personal camera that you can use to look around the scene while the video is playing. Next, you can use your smartphone with Google Cardboard, which is kind of a makeshift virtual reality viewer. It costs around $15, and this is the way I prefer viewing 360-degree videos. It just creates a really immersive experience and is a lot of fun. Finally, a more expensive option is using something like the Oculus Rift or any other virtual reality viewer. And don't forget, I'm going to have links to the metadata tool below this video. I also have a link to the actual video that I rendered out during this tutorial. Just a little quick 15-second sample. I also have a couple other 360-degree videos that I've created with SkyBox for you to preview. Hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. I'm going to be making a couple more follow-up tutorials involving SkyBox Studio and other options you can do with the plugin. This is Charles Yeager for Tuts Plus.